single leg tackle, penetration should carry you directly to the leg you are attacking, keeping your head inside the leg. At this point, you should be on your knees. It's important to keep your opponent's weight on his free foot, which can be accomplished by standing up or bringing your outside leg up and driving across. But first, penetrate under the knee, partner pushes you by and moves into tie-up. Shoestring drill. Try to touch your opponent's foot before he can move it. Bobby demonstrates the position of the hands in a single leg tackle. When shooting to the right arm will lock the left wrist. When shooting to the left arm will lock the right wrist. Using a drop step, Black goes directly toward White's knee. Note the reaching right hand, the long step, and the position of the head. These techniques are designed to prevent the arm on the side of the leg that you plan to attack from countering. From a hand control position, Black releases the hands and starts a head snap setup. White's reaction is to raise both his left arm and his head. Black times his penetration to White's reaction. Black has elbow and wrist control. He releases the elbow and quickly overhooks the forearm, jerking it toward his chest. He then releases the arm and begins a single leg tackle. White's reaction of pulling back allows him to attack the exposed leg. As White attempts head control, Black intercepts the left arm at the elbow with his thumb on the inside. He holds White's elbow to prevent the arm from countering his penetration as he steps in for the tackle. From an elbow and wrist tie-up, Black extends White's elbow by taking a drop step. As White's left arm is extended, Black posts the elbow and makes his penetration. White has wrist control and is attempting a collar tie-up. Black uses an elbow post setup. White's reaction is to move the leg on the side where Black is posting the elbow. Black then attacks the leg on the opposite side. Black has elbow control and uses his forearm to knock White's arm from his head. This exposes White's leg. White is attempting a collar tie-up from the knees. Black waits for White's attempted collar tie-up, then using a forearm post, he attacks the exposed leg. Black has a wrist tie-up. He then begins an arm drag. The arm drag exposes White's leg. Black steps up to change to a single leg. He brings his head to the inside and steps over the leg, securing the single leg tackle. From the wrist tie-up position, Black moves to a shoulder snap setup. This is particularly effective when White is attempting elbow control. The shoulder snap frees the elbow and at the same time gets White to react by leaning forward. From a biceps control and wrist tie-up, Black releases the biceps and slaps the right wrist. He then begins his penetration as White reacts to the wrist slap. From a double wrist tie-up, Black releases White's left wrist and starts to drag his right arm. White reacts to the drag by pulling his arm away. Black then attacks the opposite leg. White attempts a collar tie-up. Black assumes elbow control with a wrist tie-up. He turns his head but not his body and pushes White's elbow down toward his opposite knee. Black then begins his single leg attack. Since straightforward penetration will place White's leg out of reach, it's necessary for Black to take a side step to cut off White's escape. White controls Black's elbow. Black uses a head snap technique to create an angle. he steps in and attacks the near leg while forcing the head away. The breakdown for the single leg tackle will depend upon the position of your opponent after you have attacked the leg. Black has attacked White's leg with a single leg tackle, and White has countered with an overhook. Black's second move is a rubber arm and back heel. Black has placed his left hand on the mat for support, and with a circular motion steps up and hooks the near leg. Controlling White's leg with his own, he begins his rubber arm. This is accomplished by turning the palm up and moving his head away from his opponent. He then drops his right shoulder and pulls his arm straight out. White has countered Black's attempted single leg tackle with an overhook. Black posts his left arm and pivots his right leg in a circular motion over the attacked leg. Using his arm for support, Black pulls back on White's heel, forcing his head into White's crotch while driving off his left leg. He then reaches inside the crotch and behind the knee, forcing White off balance. White has countered Black's single leg tackle by thrusting his weight back into a sprawl. Black places his right hand behind White's legs for support and slides his knees forward, using his head and hand to lift, at the same time straightening his back. He starts the lifting motion and takes hold of the leg with both hands, then turns and drives forward and comes out on top. White has countered Black's single leg tackle by thrusting his weight back in a sprawl. Black places his right hand between White's legs for support and slides his knees forward, using his head and hand to lift, at the same time straightening his back. Black starts to lift and takes hold of the leg with both hands. He then releases White's legs with his left arm and brings his hand inside around White's waist as he throws him to the mat. Black has a single leg tackle and White counters with an overhook. Black releases his single leg and locks his hands in the bear hug position as he comes to his feet. He takes a step to the side, throwing White to the mat. Black has taken a single leg and White has countered with an overhook. Black moves into White, releasing his locked hands from the knee and stepping over White's trapped leg. This treetop brings the leg up in the air and tight to his chest. He then kicks out White's supporting foot, which sends him toppling to the mat. Black counters White's single leg with an overhook. White frees his leg with a step-over action, maintaining control of Black's leg by hooking it at the knee and at the ankle. He then steps inside Black's crotch and trips the far leg just above the knee as he rubber arms out. Black has a single leg tackle and White counters with an overhook. Black, bending at the knees, drops his hips and keeping his back straight, lifts for the finish. Black has a single leg tackle and White is countering with an overhook. Black releases his hands and slaps White's knee, at the same time stepping between White's legs into position for a double leg tackle. White secured a single leg tackle. Black is countering with an overhook. White reaches across and catches Black's free leg, driving across and tackling both of Black's legs. Black has a single leg tackle and White counters with an overhook. Black maintains control of the leg with constant downward chest pressure on White's upper thigh. Black's shoulders press tight to White's thigh for additional control. He then forces White's legs apart. When his legs are sufficiently spread, Black begins a circular motion, bringing his opponent to the mat. Black has countered White's attempted takedown with an overhook and is applying pressure downward. White, feeling the pressure, reaches inside Black's crotch, does a side roll underneath Black's body, and comes up on top. Black has a single leg tackle and White counters with an overhook. Black unlocks his hands at the knee and drops his right hand to White's heel. He then applies chest pressure on White's upper thigh and begins the breakdown, using his chest as a fulcrum and his right hand as a lever. Black has a single leg tackle and White is countered with an overhook. Black lifts his elbow up and does a knee dip while reaching his left arm into White's crotch. Black changes direction to complete the takedown. near arm and opposite leg takedown is actually a combination of two other takedowns. The arm is controlled as in a fireman's carry. The penetration is executed as in a single leg. In this technique, the arm that is controlled is taken in the direction of the opposite knee. Your head stays to the inside of your opponent's leg. The arm that is attacking his leg will lift it up. The controlling arm in the fireman's carry position will pull down on his arm, moving in circular motion, throwing him to his back. White is controlling Black's elbow. Black moves his hand from a biceps position to a shoulder position, snapping the shoulder and freeing the elbow at the same time. Black starts to attack the leg after he has cleared his elbow. His left leg starts to swing back, creating a circular motion which takes White to his back. White has elbow control. Black takes a collar tie-up and snaps White's head to the side. White's immediate reaction is to raise his head. Black, feeling this reaction, starts to attack the leg. Black is controlling White's arm with an overhook. He raises his hand and brings it down, snapping White's forearm. He then penetrates in for the opposite leg attack, much as he would on a single leg tackle. White has a collar tie-up and Black takes elbow control, placing his free hand behind White's wrist. He then pushes White's hand off his neck and down toward the mat and past his body. He then starts his penetration and finishes with a throw to the mat. Second moves for the near arm and opposite leg are also used for the fireman's carry. White is controlling Black's arm as in the fireman's carry, making sure to keep his head off the mat. He reaches across and behind Black's knee, placing the palm of his hand on the outside of Black's knee while pulling downward on his arm. White drops his shoulder and trips Black over his knee. White then scissors his legs and comes to his knees as he reaches up around his opponent's waist. White starts to pull down on Black's right arm, keeping his free hand on the mat and his head up. White maneuvers his elbow in a position behind Black's arm. White now drives his elbow under Black's armpit, at the same time pulling down on Black's forearm and sits to the side, forcing Black off balance. He then comes to his knees and on top by scissoring his legs over. Successful arm drag, the arm has to be controlled above the elbow, turning the arm across and toward the opposite knee. This motion will expose the leg and the entire right side. Bobby's going to demonstrate proper wrist rotation on the arm drag. From a square stance, Black ties up for and fakes a fireman's carry. White reacts by moving his leg back. Black then changes to an arm drag and drives across to finish the takedown. White is controlling Black's wrist and head. He releases Black's head and reaches across his body to the arm for a fake arm drag. He then takes a short step to the outside of Black's right leg, pulls down on Black's arm toward the mat, and does a sit-through to finish the takedown. Black controls White's wrist. He then moves into position and attempts a foot kick. As White reacts, he changes to an arm drag and moves towards White's exposed sides. He then drives across to finish the takedown. Foot kicks are techniques used to break your opponent's balance by kicking one foot across the center of gravity. The important point to remember is that his weight has to be removed from the foot you plan to kick. The head snap technique is an effective move from a collar tie-up. It is particularly useful when your opponent has elbow control, either while standing or on his knees. From a collar tie-up, Black steps forward and to his left. He then pivots his body and snaps his elbow past White's chin while snapping his wrist. This creates an angle and enables him to penetrate. From a standing position, Black pulls White's head down by using the collar tie-up and wrist control. He then does a head snap which creates an angle, allowing him to go behind as White's momentum carries him past his body. From a wrist control and collar tie-up, Black fakes a foot kick. When White reacts, he uses a head snap to create an angle, placing him behind White. Black has assumed wrist and collar control. He then snaps White's head down to the side and drives his arm toward the mat and moves across White's body. The shuck is a technique to create an angle of advantage which places you to the side of your opponent. White is controlling Black in a collar tie-up position. Black reaches over White's arm and assumes a collar tie-up. He then releases White's right wrist, placing his free hand behind White's elbow while taking a step and pulling White's head close to his body. Black uses his hand to snap White's hand off his head. White has a collar tie-up while Black controls the elbow. Black begins to create an angle by looking away and changing his foot position. At the same time, Black uses his thumb and drives White's elbow off his head and toward the mat. Black clears White's elbow past his head and drives across, placing himself in a controlled position behind White. Black controls White's elbow and far wrist. He then changes from elbow control to a collar tie-up. Black releases White's right wrist and he shucks the elbow. Black uses a collar tie-up while he controls White's left arm. He forces his elbow into White's chest, driving White off balance. Once White's side hits the mat, he changes position and ends up on top. The ankle pickup requires a back step to the side. The stepping leg will be on the side of the hand that attacks the ankle. You must place the controlled portion of your opponent's body over his ankle. The controlled portion is pulled down and placed at an angle over the foot so that your opponent cannot remove his foot. Your head must remain at the same level as the controlled portion. Once you reach the ankle, do not attempt to pick it up. Instead, push the controlled part of your opponent's body over his ankle. Using an underhook tie-up, Black controls White's arm. He then begins to maneuver backward in order to get White to step toward him. He applies pressure on White's right shoulder by pulling down in the direction of White's stepping foot. He then attacks the ankle, forcing White backward by pushing his shoulder over White's foot and pulling White's supporting leg off the mat. The head and heel ankle pickup is executed by placing your opponent's head directly over the foot you plan to attack. This is often done by using the collar tie-up. His head must be pulled down and placed at an angle over the foot so that he cannot move the foot you plan to attack. Your head must remain at the same level as your opponent's. Black is in an overhook and underhook position. He starts a whip over, and White takes a step forward to maintain balance. He then rotates his body and pulls White's shoulder toward his knee. He begins to attack the foot, using his shoulder to knock White to the mat. The headlock is accomplished by turning your hips into a position that carries your opponent off balance while you control his head. White has elbow control. Black reaches and catches White's head, snapping it down with his free hand. White reacts by pulling his head up. Black catches the head, throws his hip into White, and knocks White to the mat. A standing headlock is executed by stepping between your opponent's legs and turning your back to him, placing your hips across his body in order to pull his head over your hips. The head and arm tie-up is sometimes called a front headlock. Your arms are locked around the head and one arm of your opponent. Your shoulders should be applying pressure to the back of his neck. The trick is to keep his head down and control the arm. In the grip, the palm of your outside hand should be facing up. It is important to stay off your knees and to keep all of your weight resting on your opponent's neck and back. Bobby's going to demonstrate several finishes from a head and arm control.